Hey there, welcome to episode 144 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We're recording this at 10:16 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here in Greater Vegas. On this Tuesday, November 18, 2025, we do publish on Tuesdays this episodes of this audio program, so I guess this works out pretty well. Today's title and topic, Winter Wonder Planned. I was almost going to go with Winter Wonder Bland, but it turns out it's really not that bland. So, because initially I was going to talk more about the Civic Volunteer Winter, which we'll get to. But then I realized, no, I personally have a lot of stuff to do, and if nobody else is joining in right now, that's okay. It is winter, literally and figuratively. So yeah, we'll see what the feeling is by the end of today's episode. By the way, if you're not familiar with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation or this audio program, let me tell you, we rebooted the original Code for Vegas, and we founded this organization in June of 2022 as the Code for Vegas Foundation. But innovation just has a ring to it. Innovate for Vegas, Innovation District, Innovation Center. There's a big push to make the Greater Vegas area an innovation hub. I personally think it could be an innovation destination. The nice thing about the term, the notion of innovation, it doesn't have to include code. I am not a coder. Am I still welcome? Was a question I received more than once in those old days, in the beginnings, the re-beginnings. You can do anything and be innovative. You can innovate around anything. How about that? So yeah, Innovate for Vegas, I think that worked out okay to rename. So we've been Innovate for Vegas for about we renamed, I think it was in October of 2022. So it's pretty quick. And then we went through the whole process of changing the name with the IRS for the 501c3. So we do have our 501c3 public charity determination from the IRS. Just filed our 990 again, as usual. So we're doing our thing. We're a Nevada nonprofit corporation. So we are an actual business, nonprofit business, but a business nonetheless with all the infrastructure requirements and all that, which I'll touch on very briefly in this before we get started. And we have a lot of cool stuff that's possible with more than one person, but we'll get to that too. So yeah, there you go. Episode 144 already. I can't believe I've done 144. There was an episode 0, so I've already done 144 episodes. This is 145. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a brief summary of one long sentence. I will read to you. There are 4 links for today's episode, 2 the usual website links for our organization, and 2 for today's episode. Isn't that neat? By the way, I normally say this. I don't know why I forgot. The purpose statement, to give you the flavor of our endeavors. Our purpose statement on file with the Nevada Secretary of State and with the IRS: to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. Just vague and general enough to encompass innovation, which does need some ideation and implementation to make it real. Hence the triumvirate, the 3 I's: ideate, innovate, implement. There's a 4th I, integrate. Make your stuff work with other people's stuff, which I think is important when you're thinking in terms of communities and people in your city, your region, your locality. But that's that. So let me read that summary and we can get started with the links and then on with the show. In recent weeks, we covered switching the script, our mission statements, tuning up how we are pursuing everything in the near term anyway. And now we can talk about the Civic Volunteer Winter and how we can pass the time effectively while the season passes. I'll get into exactly what that means. Of course, that's today's title and topic. Innovate for Vegas activity website, innovateforvegas.org. That was our original and still is our sort of our main website. Innovate for Vegas, FOR, no spaces. Innovate for Vegas, INNOVATE, FORVEGAS Should turn that into a theme song. .org, innovateforvegas.org. It is hosted on GitHub pages. It is basically, it will be connected directly to our repositories and our ongoing initiatives and component projects. That's how GitHub pages works anyway. But the idea of hosting it there is we can very easily display information about our various initiatives. That's an ongoing infrastructure initiative to automate static site generation for all of our various initiatives and so on. So everything will have an HTML web browser visible easily. And the GitHub site does do that for repositories anyway, but they're not quite as normal for the casual visitor. If you're familiar with GitHub or GitLab, what you're looking at, the sidebar information, the contributors, the different language indicators, all the stuff that you find on a GitHub repository profile page is totally fine, but they're all the same pretty much. And so it's a little bit less friendly to the casual visitor who might like to see a little bit more personality. So yeah, we'll get there eventually. Always working. Everything on the web is a work in progress. I think that was established with the under construction era of the 90s. Innovateforvegas.org. So that's more about what we're doing. The Innovate for Vegas Foundation website, so Innovate for Vegas, same spelling, F-O-R, no space, innovateforvegas.foundation is our business website. So there you'll find information about our board of directors, our bylaws, our, what else? There's some other, we gotta have our logo, sort of authoritative repository so people can use that as they need to. Some of these things are not there yet. Our bylaws, I actually need to seat some board members so we can approve a small change to the bylaws. So for the moment, we have bylaws that are in our free Google Workspace. When you're a 501c3, you get some free stuff, which is nice. Fits into our budget nicely. We are an all volunteer organization, by the way. So I don't get paid. Nobody gets paid. Nobody works for anyone. We're all in this together. Community elevation for the win. So the innovateforvegas.foundation website obviously needs more stuff. It looks very much like the innovateforvegas.org website. I don't know how that happened. But as more work goes into these and as more documents solidify, we can, all that stuff will be there. So bookmark it. It's there. I have a link to the Wikipedia page describing the so-called AI winter. I did that as an example of what I mean by winter. The AI winter comes when there's a sort of a slowdown in funding and energy and so on. People who don't keep track of these sorts of things may believe that AI just sort of sprang up out of nowhere. But AI, everything that is going into AI today has been around for decades. Decades of research. The secret sauce is the ability to do these computations at scale. So the ability to have 100,000, super fast GPUs with the ridiculous amounts of memory and storage, and then not to mention the availability, which is not a great thing the way they've gone about this, but the availability of so much training data in the form of the internet. And the ability to, what we could call scrape it, steal it, the ability to make use of all that data from humanity at this scale. So the internet has only been growing. So it's basically a nice intersection of the computing performance, basically the point at which the research had reached, the point that the research had reached. There you go. So the performance of the technology, where the research had reached at the time, a couple of years ago, and then the availability of all this training data that could actually be reachable. I did read Empire of AI from, what's her name? Karen Howe, I think. Basically behind the scenes at OpenAI. Very interesting read, but part of it was basically, we need more data. We need more data. There was always a need for more training data as they were developing their GPT-3, GPT-4, GPT-5. And, now they're on 5. But an interesting read, but a convergence of all those factors. And it's important to know that the research had actually been going on for decades. It didn't just happen. And so when an AI winter came along, and I think there's been more than one, you can read the article, at some point everybody says, well, we're not getting very far. Let's maybe we should cut back on spending on this for a while and do something else. You could say that the metaverse is in a metaverse winter. It has been for a little while now. So it's just a convergence of funding and interest and available technology and resources and all that can be on the upswing. And then when those things wane, you're in a winter. So I argue that we are in a civic volunteer winter. And that's where we will begin the show. Finally, a link to the penpot.app website, PENPOT, penpot. We'll get to that in a second. But it's pretty cool, I guess. It's definitely, they have a nice collection of introductory and tutorial documents and so on. So the site itself looks nice and appealing. The tool looks very technical. So they're definitely, so if you do try out the penpot app, it is very, it's reminiscent of Adobe Illustrator or similar. So, but we're going to talk about that and more. So let's get started so we can get finished on this cloudy and rainy Tuesday morning. So winter is upon us. That is my opinion, but I can't imagine I'm very far off. This is not about the weather outside, although it is getting colder and wetter here in Vegas for a little while, nor about climate change, but the use of winter to indicate a general slowdown or maybe low energy in some focal area with reduced funding, reduced interest, and so on. Cold and dark, snow and ice, and vacation, of course. This is the time of the year when people are focused on getting together with family, traveling, taking some time off from work, the daily grind, and so on. So it is not snowing in Vegas at the moment. It has snowed in Vegas now and then. It's not quite like snowing on Mount Charleston, which is not too far away from where I am right now. But winter is still upon us. And I'm speaking beyond Vegas, of course, as well. I wish this were only around civic volunteerism in Vegas, but here in Vegas, as you may have seen in the news, a soft summer and reduced tourism in general have brought about a certain amount of negativity, some pessimism, if you will. Not a great time to get people to come out and volunteer time and effort for blue sky. Hey, all you have to do is forget your troubles and come out and work on an initiative to elevate communities. Now, to everybody's credit, there has been volunteer effort and resources put into some of the challenges that have come about with government shutdown, the reduced tourism here locally, and thus business slowdowns in general, lack of availability of certain resources that people were depending on. There's an effort to make food more available to those who need it, and so on. And we do have a fairly substantial veterans population here, so people are looking out for that as well, and so on. So, life and the volunteer budget is not infinite. People don't just have a bottomless supply of volunteer energy. I always call it time, effort, and expertise, but energy also helps. The desire. Sometimes there's just a lot of stuff. So understandable. At the same time, Vegas is not an island. Sometimes it does behave like one. And as I look around and I see some slowdown in the civic volunteer and especially civic tech space or spaces in different quarters, different parts of the United States, this is not to say that individual cohorts and organizations in different localities are not working on their respective initiatives and so on. But I am looking around and it is a little bit on the quiet side, I should say, or I could say. And I'm hearing about 1 or 2 person meetups. People aren't showing up or coming back as much. Some are just kind of hunkering down, and the group that they have is doing their thing, which is great. I think interest might be loosening up a bit from what I'm hearing here and there. Maybe those who might be interested are distracted or have other priorities. Again, it is the holidays and so on. So the volunteer budget is not infinite. You just don't have, any individual person doesn't have as much time, effort, and expertise, energy, and so on to keep going all the time. So, except for me, of course. So this is sort of understandable, and it's a convergence. So it's not just a slowdown for Vegas. I think it's a general slowdown. Yeah. So just a theory. If everyone across the United States disagrees with me, that would be great. Then I'll know it's just us. So what to do then? What to do with all of our free time? And by our, I mean me, my free time. As far as Innovate for Vegas Foundation, in this context of what I believe is just a low energy period, the weekly Monday initiative meetup has been put on hiatus. That will come back when we have some people interested in participating in actual initiatives. I found that the initiative meetup and the office hours meetup weekly Tuesdays, so initiative on Monday, office hours Tuesdays, get intermingled when people have visited. So they just show up to one of them and want to talk about anything. And that's not the goal. That ends up being a little bit, I'll use the word unfair. That's not, I don't mean that to sound too upset, I suppose. But Monday is for initiative meetup. Tuesday is for office hours. So Monday is for the more technical, or here's what we're at, more hands-on. Tuesday is more of a conversation, more of a discussion, question and answer. Like, hey, what is this? How does this work? What if I want to do something? I'm from a different city or state and a different place, and how are you doing it so that we can do it, or things like this. So there are two different types of meetings. It would be like, I don't mean to be too crass, but a funeral on Monday and a wedding on Tuesday, and you're like, oh, I showed up to the wedding, but I'm going to give a eulogy. You're like, no, that was yesterday. So I have the two different meetings, but I have them near the beginning of the week so that the week is freed up for other things. But I think that ends up being it's too easy to not quite come for the meeting that is on the particular day, if that makes sense. So taking a hard line is in the offing on the return of the initiative meetup. The initiative meetup will probably be invite only for people working on initiatives. We did have the notion of like an introduction to initiatives, and that might make a comeback, but basically you would want to like being invited to a meeting. So it's not just an open meeting for anyone to just show up if they want to. It'd be more like, I want to come for the onboarding, or I want to talk about open transit. I'm working on open transit, or whatever it is, right? So that'll be, the Monday meeting will be a little bit more strict, I guess you could say. The office hours have not been too productive in the past few weeks, but even in the best of times, the holidays, travel, family, these have priority ahead of time to make sure everything is sorted beforehand. So even though Thanksgiving is 2 weeks away, almost, a little bit less now, people are thinking holidays today. They're thinking about next month. They're thinking about the logistics and the operations of taking time off, travel, potential travel, and so on. So they're not thinking, oh, I got to go to that Tuesday office hours meeting. So I don't anticipate having a big crowd of people showing up anytime before January. We still need to fill 2 empty seats on our board, though, board of directors. And somewhere in there is a board of advisors plan that the board of directors and I could discuss, all of us on the board. So I'm on the board of directors, of course, managing director, but a board of advisors plan to include more people who want to be mentors or take time in a more, advisory capacity, hence the name, to weigh in on our initiatives and how we interface with our communities and the rest of the world. So I envision it being a collection of people that are more experienced and who want to participate in some way, but with a more or a less formal commitment and more hands-on. The board of directors doesn't necessarily need to roll up the sleeves, as they say. The board of directors is part of the business side, the corporation. It's a Nevada nonprofit corporation, after all. So the board of directors business, participating in long-term strategic decision-making and oversight of our how close to the tracks we remain as we move along them. Board of advisors would be people who want to be a little bit more hands-on and work more closely with initiatives and the effort and the volunteers and so on, They wouldn't be legally, they're not on the paperwork that's filed with the state. They're not, it's not as formal. The Board of Advisors would be expected to be more interested in more hands-on, or being at least more aware of technical aspects and so on. A Board of Advisors might have particular experience with civic volunteerism, or with software development, or with hardware development, or with language translation, or marketing, or there's a whole host of things. That's why Code for Vegas, Code for America, kind of a misnomer. It sounds good in marketing until you go, well, wait, there's a lot more to all of this than just coding. So, yeah. So Board of Advisors, we'll see if that can come together. So how we interface with the other communities and the rest of the world. This being the Civic Volunteer Winter though, in case I did not mention that, did I? I think I mentioned that. Perhaps. Getting people to respond to any outreach is tricky enough. Asking people to volunteer time they may not have for our efforts here may sound better a little bit later, early next year maybe, but maybe not right now. I'm hoping winter aligns with winter, autumn and winter, perhaps. In the meantime, for now, there is only one person to keep the place looking lived in, so to speak. The office hours can switch to bi-weekly, which is timed nicely for the upcoming Thanksgiving week. Hanukkah and Christmas don't align so well, so we'll play 16 December by year. That would be an alternate week after December. What is it, 2nd? So this week, the week after Thanksgiving, is, I believe, November 2nd. I can look right here. Yes. So Thanksgiving week, no. December 2nd, yes. And then December, okay, since I'm here, I think December 14th, no. December 9th, skip. December 16th is during Hanukkah. December 23rd, skip. December 30th is right before New Year's Eve, but so we'll see what happens with that. And then January 6th, if I'm not mistaken, that's CES starts on 6 or 7. CES 2026, which I go to every year, even though it's not 6 through 9. Yeah. So the January 6th one will be skipped for CES, and then we'll see about getting back to every week, but we'll go bi-weekly starting this week. So calendars will be updated by accordingly. So yeah, there's only one person. What are you going to do, right? With nobody responding to email outreach for those holidays leading to people heading out of town and whatnot, the next best thing then is to learn new stuff. So that's why initially I was thinking, mostly we're going to be not doing anything, kind of shutting the place down for the snow. And I just watched The Shining again the other day, so I was thinking what is the name of the hotel? I'm totally not remembering the hotel. The hotel in the Shining is Hotel in the Shining. The Overlook. Yeah, we're going Overlook hotel mode, but not really, because I'm still going to be here. All work and no play makes Dan a dull boy, something like that. So, yeah, let's learn stuff. First, Penpot, hence the link. So you may have heard about Figma and their fairly recent IPO. They did pretty well. Immense popularity and financial success thus far. It is a well-known platform used by web designers and UI designers to craft parts of a user experience on the user-facing side. Usually, you can use it for other things. You can use Figma and whatnot for logo design, other illustrations of what for figures and illustrations and so on. Figma is not free open source software, however, and while it can be used to develop pieces of open source software and other component project elements, I don't think there's any conflict there at all. As far as how it can be used, using non-free tools for such things can be a little bit risky if there is some need to exceed a free tier to maintain something in an initiative catalog of elements. Basically, Figma is off the table because of this. So in other words, if someone were using Figma, they made a contribution to one of our initiatives. Hey, here's some design files for the user interface, the overall user experience, and so on. And in order to use their submission, there's a tier of Figma, and I'm just using Figma as an example. There are other scenarios with other platforms and tools and so on. But in order to properly edit and make use of your submissions, in order to use Figma to edit this, we need to have a paid version, or there's a new feature that's not supported, wherever the case may be. It may well be in the present day, this is not an issue, but it could be. The real take home though, and you've seen this if you pay attention to open source, the drama of open source, things like Redis, things like Terraform, things like MySQL went through this a little bit. You end up with, a company when it goes public, especially the shareholders may at some point say, hey, you're giving away too much. You shouldn't have a free tier like that, or it should be a time, you can only be free for a certain amount of time, and then you have to, you must be a pay or whatever it is, right? So you never know, things change. And when things change, you end up with pieces of an open source project that you can't properly use. So having alternatives to Figma that are open source and will maintain that state into the future, those fit into budgets more easily, but also align more with the value proposition of open source and civic volunteer and community elevation and so on. So there has been a free and open source platform called PenPot available to use, to self-host even, so we can run our own PenPot platform, which is on the table when we reach that level of participation. We can self-host a lot of our tools that we use, which will be nice. So it was intended, PenPot was intended to take the place of Figma when Figma was first in discussions to be acquired by Adobe. Adobe is most definitely not the friend to open source. I have to admit, I'm not really a visual designer by most measures. I think everyone would agree with that. And the entire Figma or PenPot workflows have been foreign to me completely. I was not sure where to even begin. PenPot, by the way, is a reference to the pot or can, a pen holder that some people just have a vessel one might store pens in. Maybe a cup, maybe a mug. So PenPot, there you go. Well, as of, now it's 2 days ago, I think, I decided to do the sensible thing and go through some tutorials that are available on the PenPot website, which I have linked to as a starting point anyway, and start at a reasonable place, the getting started starter, the hello world of sorts. I've had my aha moment, so now I can see how to integrate this design tool into our workflow, especially into our separated repository model, display collaboration across Agile for Volunteers iterations. Am I now a talented graphic designer? No. Am I now a talented UI designer? No. But at least I have some notion of how to use the tools. So that's a sort of on the required list. So I think I can actually begin a little autodidactic PenPot journey in the coming days and weeks and continue developing a workable approach to volunteer design collaboration with a tool such as PenPot. It's a lot better to say, well, just use PenPot. And if somebody says, no, I don't know how, I use Figma. And I would say, well, PenPot does a lot of the same things. And it does some things better. And it does some things that integrate more easily with open source. And at some point, hey, we have our own platform running. You can sign in here and it's connected directly to all of our projects and so on. So, but I can't do that if I have no idea how it works. So that's going to be a bullet item. Bullet item? Yeah, bullet item on my list of things to do to be familiar with the tools. Speaking of tools, there are tools from the old days. PenPot is more modern. It's a new tool. Definitely have been needing to dive into that, and I'm not happy to have gotten over. No, I'm sorry. I am happy to have gotten over the activation energy hump. Like, oh, okay, this makes sense. At the same time, I've been reflecting on my original journey into computer programming. Not that Innovate for Vegas is only coding, but I am a software engineer by academic and career background. So it is what it is. Where I do other stuff too, wherein I taught myself BASIC. I don't know if anybody even remembers BASIC, Beginner's All-Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code. I think I was around age 10, 6502. That's a microprocessor in the Apple II line of computers. I learned 6502 assembly language, somewhere in there. Then I learned Pascal on a VAX, working with a blind student attending a nearby college. community college. When I was 12, it was Grand Canyon. I talked about this in an episode of Quaggling Sand, actually. So if you're curious, I have told that story. So I was 12. I was in the 7th grade. I was really getting into programming in general. If I could access a computer anywhere, I would try to do it. Because we did not yet have a computer at home. But then so basically, starting when I was in 6th grade, we had our Atari 800s that my elementary school had purchased. And because I was one of those bored students, they're, oh, why don't you just go play with the computers? So started learning computing, the nature of computing right around there. So age 12, learning Pascal. This was good enough at the time to just learn these couple of things. But in hindsight, well, I really should have jumped into Lisp and Fortran more, especially through high school. Our high school did not have a lot of computing resources, but I had a computer to use. I could have been pursuing these a little bit more. Now, Lisp and Fortran did not necessarily run on my Apple IIe at the time, but eventually I did get a modem. I guess it's more about resources and convenient access and so on. Probably could have, but let's say that's the way it is. So Lisp and Fortran are really old programming languages. They are pervasive, or they were, and they still are, and people just may not know it. By the time I was in college, some of my classmates were working on in those directions. Lisp for computer science people, Fortran for the mechanical engineering people, for examples. Fortran, formula translation, was and sort of remains a language for performing algorithmic computation. For computer engineers and computer engineering, where I was, assembly language, so 6502 assembly language, which I had learned, assembly language for DSPs, digital signal.
Assembly language emerged in the 19th.
Okay, sorry, I got a little Alexa Plus there. I'm not a fan. Where was I? So assembly language, 6502, I had learned. Digital signal processors at the time were more programmed in assembly language. So we learned 56,000, Motorola 56,000, DSP assembly. What else? Oh, and we were doing microcontroller work. So 68HC6. Oh, 68HC11. Sorry, 68HC11, and we did get a 68HC16, and I think we had a 6807 microcontroller. Anyway, so some nerdy stuff there, but we were much closer to the hardware. Lisp definitely abstracted away from the hardware. Fortran, pretty much procedural programming language. So we were closer to the hardware. Those are more, like Fortran, you don't need to know what programming model you're in. You're working in Fortran. Lisp, same thing. If you're writing assembly language, you need to know which microprocessor or microcontroller you're using. So you're much closer to the hardware. I'm glad I learned what I did back then, and I have used those skills time and time again through my career, so not a problem. I even learned Forth as part of my open firmware phase when I was at UMass. That's a fun language for some use cases. You could argue it's sort of on the side of assembly language, but it's abstracted enough so you're not writing assembly code, but you're much closer to the hardware. Anyway, using the tools of the old days is quite educational. Why did Fortran work the way it did? Why did COBOL work the way it did, which we all learned about during the pandemic, that nobody's programming in COBOL anymore? Both of those languages are still in use, though, Fortran and COBOL. We only hear about them when the world discovers that the code has no maintainers. So all that COBOL and Fortran code floating around, and Lisp and all these, it'd be nice if people still knew how they worked when you need to know how they work. So, Lisp is something of a different thing, though, like PenPod. It is something I have had on my list for a while, longer than PenPod, actually. But I always manage to procrastinate getting started. While we're at it, I want to get some Prolog going at some point. And I wouldn't mind exploring Smalltalk a little bit just for the place in the evolution of object-oriented programming that Smalltalk led to. But Prolog is very unusual. I've tried it a tiny bit. I really need to become a little bit proficient with it. This is not the episode to explain what Prolog is, but at some point it'd be kind of fun to have an example Prolog implementation of something and say, okay, this is how you can use Prolog in a useful way. It's why a language like Prolog. There are variations and other other takes on logic programming, which is what Prolog is. It's sort of a precursor to how neural nets work, sort of. So it'd be interesting to understand how these things work. I think everybody is now into the you got to learn JavaScript and you got to learn Python and you got to learn maybe Rust for programming with AI toolkits and whatever. I think it's interesting to not have to depend on AI for everything, which is probably a direction some are going in. We are not. I've talked about this in previous episodes. But there's new stuff as well. The new stuff, just like PenPot, there are newer modern tools usually available as open source tools and tool chains, which is nice. Definitely fits into our budget. Along the way, I've experienced the usual set of Unix-ish tools with especially in college, a lot of Unix and then Linux and so on. So tools like sed and awk and Perl and bash and a few others that for a while, I was using them all the time. I have to admit, I have not used sed and awk in a long time. They're totally useful. They're a little bit terse. I do use bash all the time. Perl, not so much. I really jumped into the Python camp, and you can do a lot of similar things as with Perl, but knowing how Perl works is useful. Of course, C and some C++, a tiny bit of C#, and more recently, again, Python, a lot of SQL. And I have to be honest, I have never enjoyed JavaScript in any way, but I have used it for this and that over the years. I know how it works. I was working at Netscape when JavaScript was being developed, and I sat very near the person who was driving that. So I was always around the aura of JavaScript. I am not a designer. I avoid the front end, and I am not a fan of Node either. So basically, I don't really have a lot of day-to-day need to play with JavaScript, but JavaScript is one of those tools. It's in the toolbox, and it is used a bit, just not by me, but you do have to know how these things work. I do anyway. There are the shiny new tools like Go and Golang, if you like, and Rust. I've barely entered my awareness, to be honest. Go has been around for a long time, and I've really just never used it for anything. Zig is gaining popularity on the C side of the world, and it does come closer to C from what I understand. It links directly with C libraries and so on. If I do get into Lisp at some point, and I really should, Scala and Clojure would be good ideas to become familiar with. And while we're at it, we may as well look at Haskell and OCaml for functional programming. And I also, if I'm not mistaken, is Mastodon written in Ruby? Mastodon Ruby. I think is it written in Ruby? Let me see. Yep, written in Ruby on Rails. That would not be my first choice. I never really got into Ruby as a programming language. There's nothing particularly wrong with it, but it would be something I would want to be familiar with as we roll out our Mastodon deployment. So I wouldn't necessarily have to be hacking on Ruby, but I should know how it works, just in case we want to hack on Ruby. I know I've just mentioned a whole bunch of different languages. This is too many, right? Well, I don't necessarily want to convert to completely new tools and languages. I'm not looking at, let's switch everything to OCaml and, no. OCaml and Prolog, that'd be fun. Actually, that would be sort of a challenge, right? Well, a whole hackathon, a programming hackathon, so it would be more oriented towards coders, right? Of course. You must use a language you've never used before. And try to implement relatively simple things like you and other, a team of 2 or 3 people try to implement like an RSS reader or something practical, but using a programming language you've never used before. It'd be like going to a country where you don't speak the language and you don't have a translator with you, so you just have to figure it out. It'd be kind of fun. And I used to do these, that's how I used to learn programming, was I had a challenge of some sort, and I guess I'm learning C today because I have to do this in C or Python or whatever the case may be. I believe it's a good idea to become more familiar with older and newer tools. So, and again, this was my mindset when I was learning with my voracious appetite for computing and computing technologies. I wanted to be around computers, use computers, learn about computers. When you say that enough times, it sounds like simple, but it is a fascinating field, technology in general. But what I find in my travels of late, especially directly involved with Innovate for Vegas efforts, there's a lot of focus on JavaScript script and React for younger people learning how to program, how to use computers, and React Native and TypeScript. And so basically JavaScript. And this is great for getting a paying gig, getting a job working on somebody's website or a front end development and so on, and Node in the back end and all that. But it's not great when it comes to comprehension, understanding how systems function, identifying the best tool for the job, and so on. So what I've seen more often than not is, I don't know how the computer works. I only know how JavaScript works. And there is a time and a place where that is perfect. That's all you need. And there's another time and place where you really need to know a lot more about how computers work, about how memory works, about how protocols work, and so on. Is Python really the best tool for math when Julia is there for us, or Fortran even? Having some idea, having more ideas is not a bad idea in my opinion. So if everything is JavaScript, or in my case, I use Python for a lot of things, and Python is really good at a lot of things, it's not always the best at the thing that you're working on. And again, you may have to integrate with or debug or become familiar with how a Ruby on Rails implementation works. Ruby is the programming language. Rails is the framework for an application, a web application usually. So yeah, Ruby on Rails, if you've never done Ruby before, then you should kind of know how it works. If you're going to be depending on the functionality of a platform written entirely in Ruby on Rails. So there you go. It's just my opinion, but I think anybody with intellectual curiosity, now I'm not saying everybody has to learn to code. Those days are past, but it is completely useful to be able to, if you are in the field of technology, to be able to take a look at something and say, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. I see what the Fortran array is being allocated here. Oh, they're one indexing. Okay. That was a thing at a time. If you're a MATLAB person, you know that MATLAB is also one indexed, which can be really off-putting to people who are used to zero indexing, because for a while you're like, what is going on here? Off by one is the rule. So yeah, I think I think if you are interested in this stuff, then it should be something that just becomes a natural curiosity factor. Like, I should want to know how Rust works. And I'm also curious to know how Fortran works from a practical hands-on experience. I know how Fortran works, but to actually go through using it, making something with it. It's like looking at the recipe for a cake. You can guess that it's going to be a cake, but the difference really becomes clear when you actually follow the recipe and make the cake. And there's some other stuff to take advantage of this winter time period. As I say frequently, not everything is code. There is some documentation to work on for Agile for Volunteers and a namespace to define for Project ACT, the Autonomous Cohort Tessellation, for the TILE vocabulary. That's the Tessellation Information Linking Everything. And it's intended to be an extension to FOAF and DOPE, which I've talked about in a previous episode, friend of a friend and description of a project. So FOAF and DOAP, FOAF and DOPE. So TILE will encompass those things and include some other stuff. That's the nature of the semantic web and of structured data. And technically this has some code in the Project ACT stuff, but it's not all code. Some of it is documenting how these things work and thinking through whether it's a complete vocabulary and so on. There's always some website stuff to work on. That's HTML is not code, despite what you may have heard. Repository management and the Agile for Volunteers workflow methodology is in there also. There is a little bit of code there to deal with the GitHub or any APIs, GitHub, GitLab, dealing with files and expanding files to configure things and so on. And a lot of process, so kind of a little bit of both, and dealing with GitHub and GitLab to advance that cause. So that'll be a little bit of reading and familiarity on a technical level, which I mostly have for GitHub, but I haven't really played with GitLab anyway. So that's some administrata that is technical and non-technical. I mentioned in a recent episode an effort for 2026 to drive a smarter city hackathon that will require some plain old event planning, and specifically hackathon planning. That is, what do we need so that people can accomplish what they want to try to accomplish without feeling like they were cut short. Like, oh, if we only had the documents for the thing, or if we had a tool available, or if we had some AWS credits or whatever, right, then we'd be able to do this. And so that basically the secret to a hackathon is making sure it's doable in the time allotted. That makes it a lot more fun and educational. If you make it impossible, that's too real, too real world. Outreach to sponsors, another engagement, not to mention getting the word out. So if we want to get that going in 2026, we may have to play it by ear depending on what the state of the world is. But getting going earlier would be good, and then we'll see when we can actually implement the hackathon itself. Speaking of getting the word out, we need to get MuniBits up and running, at least a version 1, and we need to get Mastodon.Vegas deployed, as I hinted at, so we can start driving our decentralized Fediverse agenda for open information sharing at city scale. So MuniBits, community bits or municipal bits being data, digital data. The idea is to have a modern first, but absolutely connected with legacy and proven systems that are not blog oriented. One of my concerns with the modern era of news publication is everything is printed news, but on the web. So it's the inverted pyramid. It's the who, what, when, where, why, how, those are fine, but that's about it. And we have a ton of modern technology with notebooks, for example, Jupyter, etc. We have maps and timelines and interactive visualizations. And there's a whole nother direction for accessible content to make information available in different forms that people can consume. And the semantic web and so on. So MuniBits will be an experiment in a more modern take using some modern tools, but coupled directly to legacy and proven systems. RSS feeds, why not? They should be ubiquitous. I think too many people think RSS is dead, but if you look around, you'll find RSS and COBOL, they're both dead, but they're very much not. So we need a better platform than LinkedIn, is my contention. And we should embrace modernity. Fediverse, decentralized. You should be able to get information from Mastodon.Vegas, even if you're on Threads. To Meta's credit, they've implemented ActivityPub and can interact somewhat with the so-called Fediverse from Threads. It's not ideal, and there are other platforms that are better than Instagram that people are working on that are directly a part of the so-called Fediverse. So the take-home, I should not have to go and sign up for a particular platform to participate. I should be able to interact with it, just like email. If I want to send you an email on Yahoo, I don't have to go sign up for an account on Yahoo. I can send you an email from my, from my CompuServe account. So I can send you email regardless because the protocols and the interoperability enable that. I shouldn't need to sign up to be, to communicate with you on Twitter or Blue Sky. I shouldn't have to, somebody already has my name on there. It's such a nightmare if you can just self-host and interoperate. And that's the intent with activity streams and ActivityPub and so on. So moving in that direction as not as a plugin, not as an afterthought, which is the case with WordPress, for example. Now you can use ActivityPub, sort of. This is from the ground up designed to be to fit into that universe. Now, let me say this at the end here. We're coming to the end. Don't worry. We're at 52 minutes by my clock. I am not going to accomplish all of the things in this next month or two that I've described here. That'd be crazy. This is not what this is about. What this is about is aspiration and reaching beyond one's grasp. None of the things I have mentioned here are foreign to me. There will be some things that are foreign to me. I've never heard about this, so I don't even know how that works. That would be a little bit less easy to plan for or to accommodate. But there are some things that I'm more familiar with, others less so. Rust, for example, I really don't know much about Rust, but I do get the concept. I have the Rust compiler installed. I have access to tools and documentation. Could start at any time. And there are plenty of examples, and there's Python Rust integration already very popular. Rust is showing up in the Linux kernel. Rust is a thing I should learn, even though I'm not familiar with it. Fortran, more familiar. Pascal, very familiar. Lisp, not so familiar, et cetera, et cetera. They're all in various positions on my personal wish list over the years. Like, I really should learn Lisp, and I just haven't. And or on my Innovate for Vegas Foundation to-do list. And I have not touched on some of the things that really need to get some attention outside of this collection of items, like marketing and messaging, our foundation's efforts, and so on. And those will follow, especially when we have MuniBits up and running. To some degree, they're better, anything better than LinkedIn. In fact, deprecating our LinkedIn pages is on the to-do list for January of 2026. It will become a much less much less used component of our general outreach, because we don't really get any interaction or engagement there. We just have people following the page and then they never respond or do. It doesn't lead to anything other than a number. Oh, we have 800 and whatever followers today. Great. The entire notion of innovation hinges on the inclination to escape one's comfort zone, that reaching, exceeding the grasp, the notion that what is available here and now is not quite the thing we need there and later. If we always go with what we know, I should say, we always come up with the answers we probably already came up with before. And while leveraging our experience is not a bad thing at all, we do it all the time. That's part of the innovation methodology. Oh, I've seen something like this. Sometimes a new challenge requires some new thinking. And that means, again, getting off the path now and then. I've seen something like this, but not quite like this. I think we might have to try something new. My goal for episodes of this audio program for the balance of 2025 is to talk about progress along the lines I have sketched out in this episode. I've talked about aspirational goals for our org in recent episodes, and since I'm solo for the next few weeks, as I have been for the past few, still need to find some directors to enter the fray. And there are no replies to those most recent board of director emails, so not making much headway there. This is more about my own focus and what I can hope to add to whatever it is I bring to the foundation now and into our future. So if I just sit idle and wait for people to come to me, I am not being entrepreneurial. I'm not being innovative. I'm just being a spectator, and that's not how things happen. And there may be some other stuff to work on as well. So that's that. Excelsior. That's been the title of at least one episode. Onward and upward. The desire, the intellectual curiosity that I hope more and more people have can drive even one person. In fact, sometimes boredom, as they say, is the driver of innovation. There's nobody showing up to meetings, so it's just me. So I might as well work on something productive and useful and advance the cause, even if it's only one person. And eventually, and I have a strong belief that this will be true, I think it is true from what I've seen thus far, the community of Vegas innovators, and there are, I always remind people, I'm not saying there's none, but the culture of innovation needs a little bit of work. It needs some cultivation. So I think the path to do that in Vegas, to show, not don't tell, talked about that previously. So making working things and deploying them and having people say, wait a minute, I didn't know that's what you're working on. And you would say, or I would say, oh, because you didn't read anything. This has all been written down and described and not quite specified, but user storied, right? All you had to do was show up and pay attention and be interested. And I think that will drive those things. But the Vegas culture is very much show me what's in it for me, show me what you got. So we can feed that. At the same time, we can increase our outreach to other places far away as California or New Mexico or Texas or Oregon. Oregon? No. Oregon. Why not? But other cohorts around the country, especially if I'm hearing that, and I've tried to illustrate this. If there are 10 cohorts spread around the country and each has one person showing up, for example, there may be more, but so if 10 cohorts each have one person, one of them being in Vegas, that's 10 people that are interested in doing these things. Why are those 10 people not collaborating? You do not need to be sitting in the same city to do interesting things. So that is an activation hump I've not managed to get over in my communications with others. That's what Project ACT is about. That is orthogonally what Agile for Volunteers is about. So aligning those things, getting the word out, or constructing the word so that we can get it out in terms of a presentation or better documentation and so on. So there's tons of stuff to do. Lamenting the lack of other people to collaborate with directly doesn't get anything done. So we're coming up on an hour of clock time. I think by the time I truncate some silence, post-produced, we'll probably be in the 55-minute range. So that's a good show for today, Tuesday, November 18th, 2025. Thanks for listening. If you're in Vegas, stay dry and avoid flooding, which we may be encountering. That's what happens when we don't have any rain. When we do have rain, crazy. Take care now. Thanks for listening, and we'll see what we end up talking about next week for progress. Take care now. Bye-bye.